Well, welcome everybody. Without further ado, we'll get going on this seminar, which is the 13th seminar of the series, What Were We Thinking? In this particular session, it's a little bit unusual and a bit different. And I've called it the Conversation Café because I really want to hear from and have some kind of discussion around some of these issues that we've been grappling with and dealing with throughout the course of the seminar series. And this particular talk I'm basing on loosely on the work of Joanna Macy, who's an activist and author and teacher, Dr. Joanna Macy, who has been working with and writing on the psychological dimensions, if you like, of crises for a long time. So I've borrowed from her framework in order to work with this particular seminar that we're dealing with today. And like I said, it's an unusual one because instead of talking or giving a presentation, the idea is that we might want to start grappling with some of the different aspects to do with what the seminar series has been dealing with. You know, it's called What Were We Thinking because we're dealing with profound and sometimes very grave issues, and whether or not they exist in actuality or in perception. I think these are really quite stressful. So Aldo Leopold famously said that one of the penalties of an ecological consciousness or education is to live alone in a world of wounds. Now, our seminar series is not just dealing with environmental issues, but ecological ones, in a sense that we're dealing with all sorts of relationalities between different forms of crisis, polycrisis, if you like, social issues that link in with economic issues, that link in with environmental issues in more of a figure of eight than as separate causes. And I'm of the opinion that this is really quite a stressful and profound thing to be talking about. And I don't agree with Aldo that we must live in solitude with our wounds. I'm actually drawing much more from the work of Joanna Macy and other ecological thinkers who suggest that in order to cope with, respond to, and move from the best possible place when we're dealing with major issues in our world, we need to deal with the emotional and psychological side of these issues. And that's where really I'm coming from. So when I was undergoing my doctorate, I came across many ecological thinkers who would talk about this idea that there are many dualisms and hierarchies that currently unroll or unfold, I should say, or roll out, that in some ways subjugate the other, the lesser other. So, you know, you have dualisms that relate to human culture versus wider non-human nature, men and women, and those are more complex now, mind and body, emotion and reason, objectivity, subjectivity, and these kind of dualisms generally seem to silence or devalue one side under a sort of a hierarchical framework. And if you take that to be true, then the emotional side of ecological crisis, social environmental crisis, I could say, require light and space. And that's what this particular session is about. So in context of sort of thinking about these issues, which I think is a really important thing to do, I think that there's also deep work to be done in reconnecting to the emotional and embodied elements to this. And like I said, I'm drawing from the work of Joanna Macy for this, and her conceptual basis of the work that reconnects, which is really one aspect or pragmatic aspect or praxis that comes from her broader work. Just so you know, Macy has published over 13 books with innumerable articles, so she really is a heavyweight in the academic world. So I'm only dealing with some small aspects of her work, but nonetheless, she is informed by a conceptual framework based on relationality. So deep ecology, systems thinking, and there's various indigenous and Buddhist teachings that talk about this sort of ethical implications of what this means, this notion of wide identification, of self-realization, or the relational self. Because what she says and what I believe and the reason I'm using this framework is that this non-linear view of reality, or this interrelational interdependencies, or this way of understanding co-implication, unleashes what she calls the power of reciprocity. So there's like an ethical dimension to thinking in this sort of ontological way, and in honoring and allowing for different types or dimensions of experience. And that's one outcome of this. And that's why Macy, amongst others, talks about a reflective consciousness. So there are, for those of you that are interested in ethics, there are strong and powerful ethical dimensions to this framework, in the sense that it is believed amongst many thinkers, and Macy, that there is great power to be had in acknowledging reciprocity. And with that comes a sense of responsibility. So from her perspective, at least, the deadening of our response, our emotional response to major issues in the world, is a big part of the problem itself. And therefore, in order to give some space or light to the emotional dimensions and psychological aspects of crisis, for example, grief, but also gratitude, allows us to have some form of agency in how we're going to now respond to the situation in which we find ourselves. And that's what I'm interested in. So I'm not suggesting that today's session is in some way a political act or even an ethical act for any of you, but I would suggest that nonetheless, it's a powerful one. And maybe it is, like me, you might see this as a way of responding, if you like, to some of the suppressed qualities of the human condition, such as our emotional, subjective, and embodied sides of our experiences. So very briefly, the work that Reconnects is based on a cycle. There's a lot that sort of undergirds it that I can't go into today, but it's reflexively informed, meaning that it's grown and developed out of the wisdom that's been gained from work like this, doing seminars, doing workshops, that's grown over decades and decades. And from this work, Macy's come up with this 4-step, if you like, way of reconnecting. And this involves, first of all, understanding the importance of gratitude, upon what we hold gratitude for in our world, within the context of wider crises and problems. And then from there, we honor the pain of the things that we see happening. And those are incredibly different and diverse. And so the idea is to honor the difference in the pain and the experience, as well as the unity of that experience and the compassion that may come from that. So the third stage is seeing with fresh eyes, because when you're exposed to other people's experiences and pain and suffering, it provides for fertile ground for compassion and empathy. And then the last stage is going forth, and that's really a very much a personal journey, and it involves incorporating this kind of thinking and feeling into moving on with daily life. So I really like the simplicity of this cycle, and I've borrowed from Macy's framework these 2 questions. These are her questions she poses in introductory sessions, so that's why I've borrowed from them. And this is where we're at for the rest of the session. So I don't know how many people have joined since I started talking, but I would like everybody to have the opportunity at least to hear and to be heard, to reflect and feel their experiences, and also to have some kind of exposure to other people's experiences too. And that's why I've posed these questions. What am I grateful for, and what hurts? And it is actually very okay if anybody would like to talk about these elements in relation to polycrisis. It could be social issues, it could be environmental issues, it could be personal identity issues. All of them are linked. The hurt might be pain, but it could also be rage. It could also be anger. It could be frustration. It could be any number of emotions. So with that in mind, I would like to invite everybody to gather their thoughts and to decide whether or not they would like to share what they are grateful for, and in relation to that, what hurts. And often when doing this, one cycles back. I find it's not two separate poles, but rather two sides of the same coin: gratitude and pain or grief or sorrow, or whatever you'd like to call it. So I have my own example of gratitude and what hurts to answer my own question, but preferably I'd wait and hear what anyone else has to say. If nobody else is willing to share or would like to share, then I'll just keep rambling on and bore you all. But I would just like to say, can I ask anybody who's willing to share their reflections on these questions to raise their hand, and then I'll follow. If any of you do raise your hands, then I'll follow in the chat box that order. Okay, we've got a brave soul. We have a hand. Another one. Great stuff. Okay, so like I said, this is all very experimental. I don't know how it's going, but we'll roll with it. If any of you would like to share a bit later on, then just raise your hand at any point, and you can also comment in the chat box and I can read if anybody doesn't want to. But Janet, you're up first. Thank you so much.
Okay, so just briefly, I mean, Emma, look, don't be intimidated by the technology. And we, you know, through the university, we were forced into this a couple of years ago with COVID. So we've just become sort of adapted to it. But yeah, I find it quite difficult when you can't actually engage with people face to face.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in your question, so I'm relating the two things. The thing I'm grateful for, among many things, is that I actually love what I do and I get paid for it. And what really hurts me is the intense frustration in the society of people who cannot work. I mean, they cannot find work and they are living in poverty. And I just think of like of work, like, well, how we spend our time and what a privilege it is to actually do something that is engaging and interesting and we get paid for it. But most people in the society can't even find work that they don't want to do in order to earn a living. Anyway, that's my bit. Thanks. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's one of the aspects when I was exposed to, I didn't actually talk about it in my introduction and I meant to, I forgot about it. During the course of my doctorate, I was exposed to literature surrounding eco-grief and the different dimensions of that, or the complexity of it. And I thought about eco-grief before my doctorate as a form of anxiety or sadness for people who are seeing things destroyed, and anxiety for how humans will cope in the future. Having read a bunch of wonderful authors, I soon come to realize that eco-grief is ecological in the sense that it also involves social dimensions. You know, we're social beings first. And so to be exposed to and to open or widely identify with other beings, including other human beings and their suffering, means you sort of have to start looking at all of the travesties that exist in the world and the massive disparities and inequalities. So I think the dimension of pain and empathy that you're talking about is being brought into the eco-psychology literature as we speak. It's becoming much more recognized as being a fundamental part of this discussion. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you have any other comments, or if not, I'll go over to Gary. But once we've heard from everyone, we'll open it up for a general discussion as well. That'll be a bit more rolling. Okay, Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. For me, I'll make it very practical. I've been swimming in our sea for probably the last decade. So what I'm grateful for is the health and the access to the sea and the ability to swim in the sea. I swam this morning, and so it's fantastic. It's awesome. It's part of you kind of fully immersed in nature in a very different space to what we usually occupy. And the thing I'm angry, sad about, grieving about is that space is changing, so we, particularly over the last couple of days, the current's changed and brought in stuff from the Agulhas current. And so there was rope floating in the water, there was nurdles floating in the water, there's plastic. And it looked like the seagulls were trying to get to the nurdles. Yeah, and I think in the work that I do, so I do a lot of work on climate resilience now. My fear, I suppose, is that the contribution I make has no impact down the line, is that the lemmings are heading off the cliff, irrespective. Yeah, so I mean, but I get up every morning, the sun gets up, that's a good sign, and I go off and swim, and it's a fantastic experience, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Yeah, thank you. Sure, I can relate to that. I can sense your love for the ocean. I think half the time I see you, you've got wet hair from being in the ocean. It feels to me that that's a double-edged sword, like the love for the thing. So thing's the wrong word, but to be able to go into the ocean, to engage, to swim, to be fully immersed, and to love that and desire it and cherish it, and then at the same time, as that love and gratitude for that access grows, the flip side of the coin, I suppose, is the pain with seeing it being diminished. I once went out on a boat on Raggy Charters to collect some baby blue penguins from Penguin Island that were starving, and I don't know if they made it back, but back to the place they were being taken, the rehab center, before they died. But I remember being absolutely struck by being out on this boat and being in awe of the dolphins and the whales and the beauty, and seeing these penguins, and we're trying to save them. And then on the way back, we passed this enormous tanker, absolutely loaded with 1,000 million pieces of Lumo plastic, and goodness knows what else. And I remember thinking, I wrote a poem about it when I got home because it impacted me, and it was called Extinction on the Boat, because the extinction was in our hands, literally in the boxes on the boat. So for someone like you who spends a lot of time in the ocean, and then you're working with these deep issues, it must be a pretty consistent form of stress. At the same time, you've got the restoration. Would you ever give it up? Would you ever give up the love for the ocean in order to avoid the pain or the fear?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just that is my de-stress, So I swim instead of doing yoga, and it's the rhythm and the blowing of the bubbles and the stuff that you see, and it's a different dimension to the one we operate in. So it's and I wouldn't give it up. It's the question of the consequence of your life, I suppose, that I'm contemplating, that you see this thing, and I think that's the problem with complexity. Seeing the complexity is that you also see how small you are within that realm, and whether your contribution makes a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that, as the grappling with the complexity is a both and affair. It's yeah, I suppose that's part of what it is that I would talk about in terms of my own sense of gratitude, which I'll get to just now. But for me, I find that there's a paradox and it's unresolvable, and because it cannot or nor should be resolved, and that's that we have some agency and power because we sense it and we know we do in terms of how we interact with others and what we put forward in the world. But at the same time, in the greater scheme of things, you know, Kidner says that we're impotent from within the establishment. You know, we're only effective from outside the establishment, but we all live and are in the establishment. We all must make money. We all must engage with the world. Janet said she loves being paid for what she does, or loves what she does. But you know, we all have to do what we have to do, whether we love it or not. So there's that constraint. Can really relate to that. I just want to check the chat box and see. Okay, nobody else has asked me to read out anything. Can I just check with anyone else here? I know that we've got a lot of people listening. If anybody else wants to contribute and put their hand up. If they don't, then I'm going to be sharing my little story. Give you a second. Okay. In that case, I'll go ahead with my sharing. Before putting together the idea for this session, I had read more of Macy's work in terms of the more academic side of it, in terms of ecological consciousness and relationality. Reading the questions, what are you grateful for, and what hurts, really threw me, because I was completely consumed with what hurts. And then I realized that Macy puts the question first, you know, what are you grateful for, in a very deliberate attempt to foster gratitude as like a restorative and important and powerful tool that helps show us or enables us to see what matters most to us. So I'm already grateful to Macy for posing those two questions in that particular order. In my own experience, living the way that I do, I mean, what you can see in the background is my a lot of my living space. It's this is my kitchen. I cook on a rocket stove and a solar cooker. This is my indoor space is 12 square meters. So I'm very much exposed to the ebbs and flows of nature in the way that I live. This plot 101, this is called Van Staden's Gorge. And, you know, when I first started living here and working to try and live a life, tread more lightly and live a different kind of life, it was very much a response to the kind of issues that Janet's talking about. I've been teaching global development in the UK and global inequality sociology for a number of years, and was very frustrated with the human social side of crises. And I really had very little knowledge or understanding of environmental issues. And then when I moved to South Africa 12 years ago, I started living in a couple of tents and with David, my partner, and we tried to be self-sufficient and grow food and be off-grid and do all these things. And my gratitude is that through these experiences, which most people in the world can never have, so there's first that, but through the privilege of those experiences and that are ongoing, I'm deeply grateful for, and also grieved by, this newfound relationality, this newfound understanding of how, well, understanding's an arrogant word, but this sense of how everything connects and is co-implicated. And it was very real for me, because on this land, we planted hundreds and hundreds of indigenous trees, and those have brought with them insects and birds and microflora and, you know, mycorrhiza in the soil and an abundance of life. And in that, I've become absolutely mesmerized by the beauty of this planet and the self-organizing capacity, but I've also been broken down and cracked up. The plot here has shown me that my ideas of control and focus on my own self-sufficiency are really problematic and limited. You know, you talk about, Gary, you know, what impact will I have? And on this particular piece of land, I'm directly responsible for the extinction of, not extinction, the demise of endangered, on the brink of extinction, endemic flora. So by planting all these indigenous trees and putting down compost and bringing in manure and building soil and planting things for a big diverse ecosystem, what I've actually done is threatened the local biome and reduced access of all of the beings that interact with those particular plants that are dying off, in particular the feignboss. So what I'm trying to say is the both and of it is the grief is knowing that I'm, even with the best of intentions, even with actions that are very focused on trying to do something ethical, I've come to realize that it's a situation in which I really am, I have some agency and I have some responsibility, but I certainly don't have control, and there's no certainty in what would be the right way to go about doing anything. So the grief is partly the relinquishing this idea that I can control even my own piece of land, the piece of land that I steward, and the outcomes of it, let alone the greater scheme of things. And in relation to that, the biggest grief that I feel is for the loss of life, diversity, and beauty that's going on. Because, you know, when I engage with this 1 acre piece of land, the amount of species, I mean, if I go outside and lift up a brick, a zillion things go running. This morning I went to feed one of the feral cats. I don't agree necessarily with having cats, but they moved in on us. I went to feed one of the cats and there was a vole in the cat food bag that I had to deal with, you know. There's always snails in the washing up bowl and insects over everything because of the way that I live. And it's just teeming with life. This one little plot is absolutely teeming with life. Hundreds and hundreds of species of just the flora. I gave up identifying everything. I haven't even begun to meet all of the beings here. And yet when I look around the gorge, there are endless fences going up. You know, I get triggered by for sale signs now because I see a for sale sign and I see bush, but I know what's in that bush now. And I didn't used to know what was in the bush. I just saw bush. And it's like, okay, bush versus house. Well, let's hope they have a garden. But now I see habitat, home, food, beauty, and the necessities for ecological functioning being destroyed everywhere, all around, all the time. So one of the things that eco-psychologists and ecofeminists draw attention to is that this is a disenfranchised form of grief, because many people don't recognize that the loss of relationships that comes with eco-crisis is very important and impactful. And psychologists are saying that they generally don't know how to deal with this kind of form of grief because it's prolonged, it's rational, and it's not something that you can really get over or beyond, and rather learn to grapple with. So one of the reasons why I wanted to share what I've just shared now and to bring this to light today is to draw attention really to the concept of ecological grief and its importance, its pertinence, and also some of the helping dimensions of it. A lot of the complexity theorists that I read, when they talk about ethics, they'll talk about the paradox of letting go and also the affirmative potential that that can give you. In other words, it's not only a sad thing to realize that you maybe cannot impact beyond your own sphere, or that the world will do what it's going to do. You say, Gary, the marching of lemmings over the cliff. Ironically enough, I personally have found that in accepting that in some part actually gives me more emotional energy and more affirmative endurance to then do the things that I do think are important, rather than falling into despair or nihilism, which are things I've sort of fallen into before in the past. So yes, to conclude, and I know I've taken up a lot of time, but the reason I've done that is because I don't see other hands up at the moment. Oh, there is one, yay. So yeah, to conclude for my contribution, 101, where I live, is a joyful tale of sorrow. And it shows me that grief and loss and love and joy are inseparable. They are two sides of the same coin. So I'm profoundly grateful for the endless paradoxes that this place bestows upon me. So thank you, 101, and all of the beings on this land. With that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass over. So I'm sorry, I do not know your name.
Hi, it's Ernst Ferg from Chemistry Department.
Welcome, Ernst.
Yes, yeah, I enjoy your series. Obviously, coming from a call it a scientist point of view, and the terminologies that we tend to use is maybe a bit different. But I think some words that you raised is no different in your space in terms of psychology, to what we do in the sciences. Is that I like that word you used, is control. In sciences, we like to fix things. We have a scientific solution for everything. It's easy to fix things because there's a scientific rationale of you do a few experiments and you see how the outcome is, and then you go and apply it somewhere. So we can alleviate all possible things through scientific means and engineering means. But I think there's obviously tongue-in-cheek, because that's not possible. And I think what you're describing, that grief, which I think scientists and engineers tend to really grapple with, is that you got suddenly a loss of control when things don't quite work out. Your experiments don't work out the way they should. It's just a simple example of providing, you were talking about providing jobs and providing just the basics. It's very easy to provide electricity for rural communities. Technologically, it's not a problem to solve. It's very easy to put up solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, whatever, and provide. But the social infrastructure and the social complexity is way out of our control. You cannot control people, how they engage or how they think. And I think that is sometimes maybe where a lot of the grief develops, where we then just give up and say, oh, well, it's too difficult from a social, psychological point of view to actually try and fix problems. And it brought, in your discussion, it brought me back to a video that I watched many years ago by De Witt. He was or might still be a National Geographic photographer. And he put this video together. And what right in this world, or what is beautiful in this world. And basically just going through his lifetime of being a photographer and being sent all over the world, photographing what is right in the world. And that was his sort of, brief given by National Geographic. And I had to watch it a few times to actually, as sort of a melancholic scientist, watch it a few times to actually understand what is he getting at. And seeing his enthusiasm, he kept then pointing to the fact that we have to change our perspective. And I think that is maybe where most of, or at least my challenges is, or my human challenges, to look at something which we cannot control, to then change our perspective on. And I think that comes down to the climate change issues, which we cannot control. We cannot put it comfortably in a box and give it a scientific formula and solve it. But what can we look at it from a different perspective and try and understand it and not going into some sort of self-absorbed depression, but saying, you know, if I look at it differently, will I get a different answer? Will I, you know, engage with the material out there differently? So yeah, it's a tough one. I enjoy reading psychological books. Being a scientist, I didn't study psychology, but I've read, you know, psychologists interpreting various social aspects. And the one is looking at ultra processed foods, being the chemistry behind it. You know, what are we doing with producing all these ultra processed foods? And the book that I just read is called Ultra Processed People. And it's very difficult to actually move away from that, because it was mentioned that we are comfortable in our work environment. We get a salary, we have pension money, you know, money goes to a pension scheme. And sadly, you know, our pension at the end of whenever we do retire, is invested in some company that produces ultra processed foods. It's a vicious circle. You know, how do you get out of it? And there it comes down to what David, and I'm reminded of that, is what is our perspective on these things? How do you look at things differently, maybe? And maybe that's just a thought I'll leave, you know, trying to answer. Where does it hurt? Maybe we should look at where it hurts, you know, from a different perspective. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ernst. It's always good to hear from scientists as well, particularly in a seminar series like this, where we're trying to bring together philosophy, art, and science as like the daughters of chaos. Deleuze and Guattari called them. Lots to chew on and think about. Helen, I do believe you're next, if you're still willing to share.
No, I am still willing.
Hello.
Thanks to everybody for going first, and thanks for all your contributions. And I love this series for the things that get said to each other. I did a lot of workshops in the 70s and kind of, so I got over that, and was thinking this morning, well, what hurts? And my back hurts because I'm getting old and my body's hurts. But that's pretty trivial. What am I grateful for? And then it sort of got, well, what hurts is living, and what I'm grateful for is living, which is maybe comes into these paradoxes of the things that we love hurt us, and the things that hurt us teach us, or, you know, we can be grateful for. So it's not that easy to pull them apart, which comes into the notion of dualisms, and kind of what I'm hearing here from Ernst, and then the notion of thinking differently, but that the clear-cut divisions. Oh, this is what I was thinking. A friend of mine did a PhD on religious violence, and one of the things she came down to is this whole dualism that makes an us and a them, us good, them bad. And when that stops functioning, a whole lot of new possibilities open up, which aren't violence, and we don't know what they are, but there's some space there. And what I've forgotten the actual main thing I was going to say. Oh, I know that this is a tricky one, that I'm really grateful I'm not poor. I'm really grateful I've got a roof over my head. And it's complicated, of course, you know, because there's implication in all the systems that allow that to be the case for me. And it's just a matter of luck where I was born. And it kind of seems to me that if so many people have suffered, that it's not a bad thing to be grateful that I'm the beneficiary, the implicated beneficiary of all this suffering. I mean, it's appalling. And yet, so that kind of complication interests me. And yeah, and all of these paradoxes. And I think there's something that makes life significant in, we are in the situation, I am in the situation, you are in the situation, we're all in the situation, and some of us are paying attention, and some of us are changing perspective. And folks are doing all kinds of stuff. And it's just, that's what's going on. And there's a significance in bringing attention to that. There's a significance in not messing around, you know, regardless of the impact that one can have, because that's also a matter of luck. And that there's a freedom in that, which is also to be valued, appreciated, paid attention to, I guess. So that's me babbling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. What hurts your back, you say? I know. Just, this morning I was lying in bed thinking, I'm aching from sleeping. What's going on? Okay. Avi, would you be willing to go?
Hi everyone, I'm new to this series. So I'm Avi, I'm a research associate with the School of Education. Yeah,
Welcome.
so thank you. There's a lot I'm grateful for, but in the context here, I'm really grateful for learning opportunities, for constantly having these kind of events, meeting people in the strangest places and really connecting and learning and growing and having this platforms to discuss things that you're grateful for and that annoy you, your hurts and your joys. And I'm really grateful that I am able to express my views in an open forum and feel safe to do so. And the hurts is the ignorance that I'm constantly up against. And it frustrates me because we live in a world with so much information at so many levels. And yet people choose to remain ignorant. They choose to not to see what's going on, not to really understand issues and talk at a very superficial level. And I think, you know, I'm getting to that point where I'm tired of sitting at the table and just kind of swallowing, you know, my words and not wanting to say something because I don't want to be impolite to people when they're talking absolute nonsense and not really thinking critically or having compassion. And what I really wanted to, well, I put up my hand is I really resonate with what Ernst and Gary were speaking in terms of, you know, the futility versus the meaningfulness. And I work as a community psychologist in the education field. And in my years of going to impoverished schools or under-resourced schools, I've come to the realization there's capacity, there's funding, you know, it's actually not that difficult to overcome a lot, not all, but a lot of the challenges, in this case, to quality education and access to education. And, you know, but the obstacles is resistance to change. And it comes across, you know, in all levels of society, this sort of fear of doing things differently, but this is how it's always been, but it's not working, you know. And even trying to break it down into little steps. Yeah, there's this total resistance to knowing, this total resistance to trying to do things differently. Yeah, which I find both interesting and frustrating. And I think that's the thing we keep saying in South Africa or Africa, you know, we are third world, we don't have, we lack, we're deficient, and that is such nonsense. If we actually open our eyes to see what we do have, I think the wealth is phenomenal, you know, but how do you get, you know, individuals, organizations, communities to stop fighting change? You know, it to me takes more effort to continue in this non-productive way that as a society we are doing, and yet people would rather do that and remain ignorant than learn, grow, change. Yeah, so there's my vent, but thank you for this opportunity to share.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining our seminar series. It's wonderful to have new faces and perspectives as well. A lot of what you just said highly resonates with me. I've gone through, I'm embarrassed to say, I've gone through lots of periods where I felt a lot of anger and judgment towards individuals, social groups, social processes. Especially, I used to focus all my anger at corporations because they're faceless, you know. And one of the hardest things for me has been to relinquish that judgment, but that's not to say that there aren't causes and effects and outcomes from certain types of behaviors, actions, processes, especially social systems and structures. But if I find if shifting from how does something work to who's doing what creates like a little bit more of a distance, or it did for me. And when I started to think about things about in terms of how do things unfold, how do events unfold, or how do they function, how do they assemble, how do they come to be, it and I was exposed to that thinking really through complexity theorists and ethicists who are ecological thinkers too. That shifted something for me because it meant I stopped looking at responsibility and started looking at responsibility. So instead of asking what am I responsible for, it's how can I respond? What am I able to respond to given the constraints and given the systems? And also one thing that threw me was meeting people who care deeply about the environment, who are in jobs that are very deleterious to the environment and being thrown in that sense too. And yeah, it's so easy with all of the weight of what's going on to find others to villainize, well, othering in general. So I think your comment there on the futility of dealing with ignorance is really important, and it's an ongoing and a prolonged situation that doesn't have a resolution, I don't think. I think it comes down to the micropolitics of our own relationship with our pain and our anger, how we want to move forward and proceed. Because if it seems to me, if we all accept that we have some agency, but we also are constrained, then there's some freedom there in how to respond, which is where I'm at. And I don't know if that links in, but it sounded what you said resonated in that way. Janet, your hand is up.
Now I'm just listening to this discussion, and I mean, for me, the central issue is this question of, you know, structure versus agency. You know, what is the relationship between them? So you talk about micropolitics of, you know, relations and how that's the sphere in which you can be active. But at the same time, you're talking about systems thinking and why, you know, how things came to be, how they are. And for me, I'm as a sort of historical materialist, if you like, in that sense, I understand things in terms of an economic system, a system of production. So it is something which is created by human beings, and it's something which we can change. You know, it's not set by the laws of physics. So I think part of the problem lies in economics being understood as a science, like a hard science, as if it's sort of preordained. But I don't personally think that is a correct understanding. But I think we have to look at the economic structure of society, basically. I don't think it helps to look. It does, obviously, in terms of your own life, you have to live in the way that you think is right and meaningful in relation to what's around you. But if you're thinking about how we change the system, I don't think it's well, I don't think we should feel like throw up our hands and say we can't change the system's too big or it's too rigid. So we just have to act within our own like small environment. I think we have to think about the system as a whole. Thanks.
Just want to give we've got like 6 minutes or so. Does anyone else want to respond to Janet or have anything else that they would like to say? There's plenty I can say on this because it's my baby, if you like. Ecological economics is my thing. Actually, funnily enough, I'm talking about all this micropolitics when really all I look at is systems most of the time. I ask, where is the I, the me in all of this we? Where is the change? Where does it live? This is what I've been grappling with, because I cannot change the economic system, and I've been writing about it and shouting about it and stomping about it for so long that I wouldn't say it's a nihilism at all, but I've retracted from that domain to a certain degree, because I feel I have to find where that economic system unrolls in my own consciousness. Where is economism? Where is my market logic imposing on my own relationships? How is the growth mentality and the incessant sort of individualism impacting on my own consciousness and how I interact with people? So that's the part that I'm talking about response to, which is not to say I don't think there aren't major systemic changes that need to happen, for sure. Helen, and then Gary. Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Helen.
Thank you, Janet. So I get to be the person in the meeting who says how amazing it is that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And yeah, the question, how do you organize? How do you organize? How? Because I think if you look at, say, the anti-apartheid struggle, two things. One of them, that there was the imagination of development was very industrial and necessary, and that's not changing. And also the notion that a political end could ignore the personal, that your character didn't matter, and clearly it did. I mean, there were a whole lot of people behaving badly in the struggle, in any struggle. And you know, how do you organize to get to mobilize for change? And how do you organize for ethics and responsibility and people being proper with each other? That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, food for thought. Our perennial issues that will go nowhere, but we are here nonetheless. Gary.
I think we need another seminar about that issue that Helen raised.
I think so too. Let's talk about that. Let's hear from you, and then we'll work out how we can build that in.
So thanks, Emma. And Janet, in response to your point you raised, I'm working on a paper at the moment that I use the movie Don't Look Up as the sort of as the framing. And there's a key transition in the movie where the professor of the doctoral student that finds the asteroid loses it on TV, and he asks the question of why can't we talk to each other about this, and where did we go wrong? And you know, if you take a systems perspective, you know, the boundary is always important to the question, you know, so where do you throw the boundary? And if you and so the question that's unanswered in my mind at the moment is that I'm not sure that humanity has gone wrong anywhere. I think humanity has just done what humanity does, and it's a cascading effect. You know, so the economic system that we sit with now wasn't necessarily created 200 years ago, but is an outcome of choices we've been making all the way through in terms of how we, you know, and maybe we're responding now because the boundaries of the planet, we've reached the boundaries of the planet, whereas previously we had space to roam. We don't anymore. So for me, it's been a very interesting question, because it goes to the point of do we have agency at a societal level? You know, so we have agency at a personal level. Do we have agency at a societal level to change our economic systems, or are we trapped in this sort of human nature that's going to take us off the edge of the cliff. And I don't have an answer for that just yet. But yeah.
So you've reverted to human nature, to fundamentalism,
No, it's not that as much as
biological determinism or something,
yeah,
psychological determinism.
no, it's not biological determinism. It's but it's so the question that occurs to me is in terms of where did we go wrong is where did we go wrong? So where's the juncture that we missed the track, so and that assumes that there is a better way of doing things and we chose a lesser way of doing things or the wrong course, yeah, because there's a great Professor Green, I think his name is, in Cape Town, was talking about when you lose your way, you go back to where you lost your way and you try again, So the assumption is that we've lost our way somewhere, and where was so the question in my mind is where exactly was that? Was it in the development of fire? Because ultimately what is killing our planet is our use of fire. It's the is it when we discovered energy? Is it when we opened? Is it the ships that we used to open up the trade routes around the coastal things that gave us quicker access to stuff? The consumerism that started in the colonial period, is that yeah. But those are the things that I use that float around my head whilst I go swimming.
So my question is, why aren't you teaching development studies? This is
Fair
what
call.
Emma used to teach all that stuff to our students, by the way.
And give them a terrible sense of fatalism, which I feel terribly guilty about now.
Really?
I
Well,
did.
would like to ask then, your analogy assumes we know where we're going, do we? Because it seems to me we got to exactly where we thought we would get to, and now we're not happy with what we have. So in order to go back and find where we got lost would entail the fact that we need to know where we're going. So, and to realize that we're not there, or that we got there, but this isn't where we thought we were going. That makes sense.
I'm sensing another potential. I like this format. What does everyone, there's still some slots left over for the rest of the seminar series. What does everyone think about having another this kind of thing where we maybe pose a certain type of question and then we come and discuss it from different angles? I'm sensing we've got this thread going of where did it go wrong, and where do we want to go? And maybe we can come up with some kind of you see I'm trying to end the seminar, can't you? Maybe we can come up with that kind of framing where we can have a more like this round table where we can all just chip in and have our own little piece to say. I think that could be very useful. I don't know what you guys sorry, I'm using these gendered pronouns now. I wondered what everybody would say to that. Maybe we could talk about it. I think it's important that we discuss this issue, this link between agency, constraint, systems, and collectivist sort of action. I think that's a really important thread to grapple with. So maybe Janet, I don't know if you'd be interested in that.
I agree, but I like Helen's question, which is, like, how do we organize at two levels? The one level is
yes,
in terms of how we act, our personal behavior. And secondly, it's like the means and ends issue. And the other is how transformative is what we do, i.e. is it just a superficial, act of kindness or something, but not actually challenging the outcome. Anyway,
okay.
I would be interested in that, but not right now.
Yes, I know you're busy. I'm not trying to goad you in actually, although Andrea would tell me to. But yeah, I think we can put together some kind of discussion session when there's a gap around this. I liked it because Helen and Janet, you framed that positively. See how I framed it in a negative way. You framed it in a more open way. How do we organize? So instead of saying, where did we go wrong? How do we organize? And that will bring in these interactions between the individual and the wider systems. I think we need to talk about this stuff a little bit more, for sure. It's certainly a prominent theme that's come up today. If it's okay with everybody.
Just maybe a comment
sorry.
from me, and please include me in that one. I think I have a few opinions and comments on that from a science point of view.
Excellent. Well, then I think we've got another seminar that will be
Because I
round
like the
table.
idea of saying, you know, did we go wrong somewhere? Or as Gary, I think, said, you know, this is the path that we are on. You know, can we go back? I don't think so. We can only go forward. But yeah, let's not open those cans of worms. Now let's start another discussion somewhere. Thanks, Gary, for that comment.
Okay. Well, everyone, I think on that note, I might end it there and say thank you so much. Deep felt gratitude for your courage in coming to the table and sharing your thoughts and feelings, and giving me the poetic license to have a go at this, which I was actually very nervous about doing. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.